In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Welcome back to another edition of the Daily Memphian's Memphis Tigers podcast. This is Drew Hill joining on this week, as I do occasionally. We're going to talk with Frank Bonner, our Memphis football beat writer, and Parth, Upadhyaya, our Memphis Tigers basketball beat writer. Everything is in full swing. We're in full sports season now, Frank. We got the Grizzlies going on, Tigers football, Tigers basketballs. It just got started. It's been really, really busy, and I know you've been keeping up with high school football around the city as well, too. So that's fun.
Yeah, playoff time for high school,
which is pretty cool. But we need to talk about the Tigers. Obviously, they just beat Rice on Friday, 27-20. Maybe a little bit of a closer game than people expected between the Tigers and the Owls there. But when you left the game, I guess, what were your initial takeaways from another close win for Ryan Silverfield?
Yeah, I think, to your point about the expectation, the thing is that Memphis has reached a point of its season where the close games are inevitable. So I think some people were expecting close games, even though Rice's, record was what it was. My main takeaway is Rice was entering that game with a top 10 passing defense statistically, right? So you knew that Seth wasn't going to put up big numbers. He threw for 159 yards. But Mario Anderson, 144 yards. They leaned on the ground game. It worked out for him. Seth's completion percentage was, one of the lowest in his career, for a single game one. But, you lean on the run game, you get the win, you move on. And the other thing about the run game, I think it's encouraging to see Brandon Thomas back. Greg DeBosier, who got injured against Florida State, he got a couple carries. So it looks like that running back room, which has been dealing with injuries all year long, appears to be getting healthy toward these last few games, which is a positive.
Just in terms of the state of the program and where things are right now, obviously the second loss was incredibly disappointing. And I know you have touched on this, with John Martin in the past, but I guess where is the psyche of this team at this point in the season? It's good that they're still winning, right? I think it's a positive sign that they took care of business at least and beat Rice. I know they're not mathematically eliminated just yet from the conference championship game. But I do wonder just where the state of this team is, how invested are these guys at this stage in the season?
Yeah, I think, especially if you let Ryan tell you, obviously the guys in the locker room. I think at this point, college sports, they're one step away from having to be professionals in terms of that, in terms of just finishing out the year and everything. And I think they're still engaged, they're still locked in and all that. Especially when you're inside that locker room, you're saying that, on the outside, we're all saying that their hopes for the championship game are gone. But, if you're inside that locker room, if you're not mathematically eliminated, you still have a shot. That's what I would be coaching. That's what the players, if I was a player, that's what I would be, believing. Now you've got to have Tulane lose out. They got to lose to Navy, lose to Memphis. ECU needs to win out, which includes beating Navy, and then you're in a four-way tie. Who knows if that's going to happen.
It's not likely.
Yeah, it's not likely. But I will say that the program is in a weird space, right? Because on one hand, you came into this year with the expectations of a conference championship, which it looks like you're not going to be in the game. And on the other hand, you're in a position to have double-digit wins in back-to-back seasons for the first time in program history. So how do you view that season, right? And so when you're asking about the players, I think the players can still look at that and have your name stamped on that, especially if you're a senior. If you're a senior, especially if you're a senior who was also on last year's team and you're on this year's team, like a Seth Hennigan, obviously, Greg Rubin and those guys, you want to have that under your hat, but at the same time, no conference championship is still no conference championship. So it's definitely going to be viewed as an underachievement, but some of the commentary about, job security and all that, you can't have a job security conversation for a coach who's going to most likely win 10 games for 2 consecutive years at a program where that isn't the norm, even if it is in a lackluster conference.
This is where I think expectations versus, I don't want to say reality, but expectations sort of set up for disappointment in a way that is more excitable, I guess. It's easy as a fan to be extremely frustrated when they lose a game like they did against UTSA, because the hope all off season and even after the Navy loss was still that you could get to the conference championship game. And for that to not happen, I think the moment that reality hits, there's this tendency, right, to overreact. And I think we saw that on my beat, right? When we talk about the Grizzlies are back rolling, right? They've won 3 games in a row. They've got guys out. But when they lost to the Bulls and the Nets, the panic had already set in, and you had people really frustrated with Taylor Jenkins. And I just think people are prisoners of the moment often. And that might be where this team stands. I guess as you break down how the season went overall, up to this point, would you still say that this season was a success, even though that the expectations were to make the championship game, and even though it might be a little bit of underachievement?
I don't know, right? So I think there's a gray area between success and failure, and this season will be in the middle of that, right? I don't think you can call this season a success if you didn't make the conference championship, not even winning it, but at least be in the game. But it's not an absolute failure either because of the stuff we just talked about with the wins. And so a lot of teams across the country, right, you live in the gray area of success and failure, right? Everybody doesn't reach whatever their main goal was. That doesn't necessarily mean that they've bottomed out either. And so Memphis is in the middle of that success. But I don't know if you can, I don't know if any fans will walk away saying it's a success. I think it's one of those, you didn't meet your ultimate goal, but yet the program seems to be.
Right. This isn't a pass-fail situation.
Yeah.
There's not only 2 outcomes. Yeah. And I don't think it's pretty hard if they end up winning 10 games to categorize, a 10-win regular season as a failure. That's pretty challenging. But there will be some people that view it that way because of what the expectations were coming into the season, because of the standard that this team set, as you mentioned in previous years, and the opportunity to try to uphold that. But this would be the first time that they've won 10 games in back-to-back regular seasons.
Yeah, and the other part of that is what can't be lost is the conference that they're in, right? They didn't lose to Cincinnati or Houston. You lost to a UTSA team that's struggling. Nobody knew that Navy was going to be as good as it was, but even it hit some road bumps down the year. So I think that's probably going to be the frustration of fans, is that you're in a conference where they feel like you should have dominated. And granted, I came into this year saying that, the bar for Memphis was the conference championship. And as of right now, they're going to fall short of that goal. So I do think you have to hold this team accountable for not making it, but also keep other things in perspective that this isn't another 6-win season, a 6-win regular season, right? And so, and then when you look at the team, one thing that is, interesting to me is that the offense hasn't been nearly. It's had times, right? It's had its games. Even in the Navy loss, they were, they put up points against North Texas. They put up points, but just the way that we saw the offense playing last year, it hasn't been as prolific this season, which is interesting because you have Seth Hennigan returning, you had Rock Taylor, Demir Blankenship returning. You didn't have Blake Watson, but Mario Anderson has shown that he's a capable runner. And so that offense just didn't click. in the way I thought it was going to exceed what it did last year. And it's not even meeting what it did last year. So that's a little interesting. And obviously a lot of things go into that. You got a guy like Rock Taylor who had incredible year last year. Now defensive coordinators have a whole season of film on him and all that. And then, Ryan mentioned losing Sutton Smith in the first quarter of the first game had a lot to do with what they were trying to do offensively. Like that was going to be their breakout player. Like he was going to, like what Rock Taylor was last year, Sutton Smith was supposed to be that for them this year in terms of having his moment. And so you lose him. And so, yeah, all that goes into effect. But I did think that this offense would be more consistent than what it had been.
So senior day is coming up. Obviously, that's going to be a big one for Seth Hennigan, right, who's meant a lot to the program. What do you suspect that moment's going to be like for him and for the roster in general?
Well, I think it will be a moment for him, and not just for him. Like if you ever hear Cramsey talk about Seth, that relationship is strong. Like that, he has mentioned several times, not just this season, but even last season, that he trusts Seth more than any other player he's coached in his career. And just to be with him for 3 years, because he wasn't here his first year, but to be with him for 3 seasons, that relationship, I think you're going to see Cramsey feel that. And we talked to him today, and the way he was talking about Seth, like that bond is tight. I think that bond is what helped keep Seth in the program. And then you look at what he's done in terms of school records and all that. I mean, this is a program that believed in him when other programs questioned his ability because he was a coach's kid coming out of high school, and they gave him the keys. And so, yeah, I do think that for anybody, Seth may not be emotional for him this weekend because they still have another game to play and then a bowl game after that. But I think once the season is all done, I think it will be a moment for him to kind of take in.
I can't pretend to be some sort of Memphis football historian because, I wasn't here for the Fuente years or even all the Norvell years. And I know they've had a lot of good quarterbacks, Paxton Lynch, Riley Ferguson, Brady White. And I'm curious to know, and I don't know if I can really predict this, like how Seth will be viewed 2-3 years from now, like when we talk about all those Memphis quarterbacks, I guess in what class. I guess you could maybe lump them all together or maybe one stands out above the others. Seth is going to have a lot of the records though, and I'm very curious to see what this will look like 2 years from now and how fans will sort of think back on Seth's career. And I don't think I know the answer to that.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because you remember a while ago when we were doing the rankings, the athlete rankings or whatever that we did, the conversation about Seth had came up with some of the people on staff, and I was saying Seth is still in his career, so it's too soon to even include him in a list like that. But 5 years from now, where like you said, where will he stand? I think if he was able to be a part of a team that won a conference championship, that would elevate him even more. I wonder how much of that will, like for instance, Brady White.
Right. Yeah, and I feel like Seth is he's just in a different situation.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's his fault, but I'm just saying people remember what Brady White made you feel because they were able to do that in 2019.
Right. And he wasn't the one that brought Memphis football out of the depths, right? That also was not Seth. Seth got to this program after a run of success and then had 4 good seasons, but it doesn't look like at least, meet the same sort of, the teams didn't reach the same heights that a Brady White team reached. So it's just interesting. I'm just interested and I don't know if I have the answer to that, like I said. But I think everybody will remember Seth as a great quarterback. It's just like in what class, I don't know.
But you do have to, wherever you rank him, he will definitely be in that conversation, especially he's playing in an era where a 4-year starter in college football doesn't happen with the same team.
He had every opportunity to go somewhere else, and he was loyal to Memphis. That should mean something to Memphis fans.
Because you could have, if Seth wanted to, you could have very well turned on your TV on Saturdays and seen him playing in another jersey after the year they had last year. And so the fact that he decided to stay and what the domino effect was of him staying. Like if Seth goes, you think Rock is staying? You think Demir's staying? Like him staying helped keep the entire chemistry of the team together, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that definitely should not be overlooked, and that's a very good point as well. All right, last thing before we move on with Parth. We had a scary moment in the game on Friday. Carmelo Overton collapse. What is the latest on him? What can you tell us sort of about that situation?
Yeah, so Silverfield, when he talked on Monday, gave some encouraging news because obviously it was a scary moment. I don't know if you watched it live.
No, I had a Grizzlies game that night, so I didn't see it live, but I was following on Twitter.
Yeah, it was a scary moment, but Silverfield did say that he was released from the hospital and he was actually back in the team facility on Sunday where everybody got to see him smiling and Ryan did say that he was walking, which was good, but he did say it was a spinal injury and they're still running more tests. But as of right now, it's encouraging to see him back in the facility, walking around, smiling. So it's a deep breath. As scary as it was on Friday, it looks like he's going to be all right.
Well, that's obviously great news. Good to hear on him. I know everybody's wishing him the best, and you hate to see those moments in football. And unfortunately, it feels like they happen almost every year. And that for it to happen here to a player on the Tigers is, a very scary sight. So I'm glad to hear that, things so far seem to be going okay for him. So best to Carmelo Overton there. All right, well, we'll be right back. I'm going to be joined by Parth Upadhyaya, our Memphis Tigers basketball beat writer. I'm back with Parth, who is fresh off of a trip to Las Vegas.
Yes.
First of all, are you alive? Are you good? Is everything okay?
Yeah.
Did you make it home safely?
I did make it home safely. I'm alive and well. I had a time, man. It was fun. It was fun. It was first Vegas trip. No need to get into the off-the-court details of said trip, but just know I had a blast. A blast was had.
As someone that has been in Vegas much longer than I would like to be in Vegas during Summer League, I can tell you that is one of the places where it's very fun for about 2 days. So you got probably the perfect amount of time
Sweet
in
spot.
Vegas.
Yeah, exactly.
It is not fun after 2 days.
Really?
Yes, because you're tired. You're asking why your coffee costs $16. Listen, it gets old fast, but
everything's expensive. Like just a simple meal
so
was like
expensive.
$40 for one person.
Yeah, it's crazy. But you know what? There's a reason a lot of people go there on vacation because there's a lot of trouble to get into.
A lot.
The Tigers, thankfully,
stayed out of it.
They stayed out of trouble.
Stayed out of the trouble.
They stayed out of the trouble. They got a big comeback in the second half to take down UNLV. Now 2-0 on the season, so decent start, I think. The story of the game, though, the second half magic, right? So
absolutely.
That's been the storyline of the season so far. Did it against Missouri, now did it against UNLV. What's been the trick for Memphis in the second half of these games?
I think it's just knowing when to crank up the defensive intensity. Like they still struggle in the half court. That has not gone away despite the impressive second halves. Like that hasn't been something that's been remedied, resolved, or anything. The half court offense is still, I wouldn't say abysmal. It's probably a strong word. That's the word that comes to mind. But it's not great. It's not fantastic. So it's in the second half when they start pressing, when they rattle teams, when they get teams uncomfortable and turn that defense into offense is when they start to find their groove. And the numbers show it too. They shot 71.4% in the second half. That's insane. 71.4%. They missed 8 field goals total, 20 of 28 in the second half. 62.5% from 3, 5 of 8. That's absurd. And a lot of that's coming from just getting open looks with their defense, right? So
I think they'll take 5 and 8 in a half from 3-point range.
Yeah, small sample size, but you'll take that all 31 games if you
think
could.
At some point, Memphis is a really interesting college team because, as we've noted, I know last time I was on this pod and we were talking, like they're not a 3-point shooting team and they're not going to be a 3-point shooting team, over the course of the season. But you want to fire up more than 8, I feel like.
In a half, yeah.
But if you make 5 of them, that's decent production from beyond the arc.
And they shot 17 for the game, just to give a broader scope, more context. 6 of 17 for the game.
Is 17 around the range you think that they want to be, or do you think they want to be a little higher than that?
A little bit higher, but not too much higher. Probably 20, 22 threes a game.
Yeah.
Certainly not Bama, where you're shooting 40 of them. This is
Right.
not in their nature. It's not how they're built. So,
obviously, I think the stars of the team are kind of showing themselves right away, right out of the gate here.
yeah, I mean, definitely the one, right? PJ Haggerty, superstar.
The talk of the offseason was
Oh,
PJ
man.
Haggerty, and now he's showing up big time for the Tigers in the first 2 games. What have you made of him so far? What do you think of his start for Memphis and sort of what he's going to mean to this team going forward? Like that's clearly the guy. And we've talked a lot about there being multiple leaders on the team.
Yeah.
As far as
Leaders
on
is
the
broad,
court,
though, right?
Yes,
On the court.
yes.
Exactly. Go
On
ahead.
the court pecking order, he needs to be number 1.
Yeah, and I think the players understand that. But then if you look back to last season, you heard similar remarks from players about them understanding the pecking order, about David Jones being the alpha, and that's our guy. Like, I remember when Memphis beat Texas A&M on the road, and Javon Quinterly and Jaquan Walton, other guys were like, yeah, DJ, that's our guy. And then obviously that understanding seemed to go out the window, right? As the season progressed, like, will this team stay together, even if the best offense for Memphis happens to be, hey, let's give the ball to PJ Haggerty and get the hell out of the way. Like, is that going to be okay with everybody else for the next 2, 3, 4 months to come? And if that is okay, then I think, it's not the most ideal way to win games when you got one guy having to put up 20, 25 points a night, but he's one of the best in the country at it, especially when he's going downhill getting to the rim. Like, it looks effortless, man.
From what you've seen so far, who's the most likely to be second in terms of offensive boost on this team?
It's tough because you went into the season thinking it'd be Tyrese Hunter, right? Like a guy that's done it at Texas. Not necessarily a scorer, but a guy that's a playmaker, has the ball in his hands, so he's bound to rack up the points. But we've seen that second, and it's only been 2 real games, but we've seen that second slot kind of rotate. Like Nicholas Jourdain showed flashes in the second half. He had 11 of his 12 points second half, went 5 of 5 from the floor, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. Colby Rogers had 16 points in the game and shot a lot of shots. So I think that second spot might be like a rotation, like a carousel, if you will. But certainly, like you mentioned, PJ Haggerty is, sharpied in at that 1A on the court.
Well, Nick Jourdain, I think, the lone holdover here.
Yep.
For him to show up big, I think, I wonder if that means something to not just, Nick Jourdain, who obviously is the one that's choosing to stick it out here, but to Penny, to have somebody that's been with him in the program perform well and do it this early in the season to hopefully give him a little bit of confidence. And by the way, somebody that's going to be pretty important to this team, given the late exit of Tyreek Smith.
100%.
That felt like a big, important development for Memphis that he played well in that game.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, not only played well, but just his attitude and his buy-in, right, to what this team needs to be. I spoke to him in the offseason about what it meant to be the lone holdover and if it was scary for him or if it was, if it was worrisome where he saw all of his teammates kind of do this mass exodus and he's the only one staying, right? Like all the lockers are cleaned out next to his in FedEx Forum, in the Tigers locker room, and his is the lone one there. And he kind of reiterated his trust in Penny, and I think that's now paying dividends both for him with, his performance thus far in 2 games into the season, but also for Memphis and what they need out of that 4 spot with now Tyreek Smith, as you mentioned, departing last week, obviously hours before the opener.
Yeah. So obviously good news there. Do you think that they can add to this front court still? Is it too late for them to do that? Where do
it's never too late with Penny to add anything.
Penny,
front court, back court, you name it.
Find a way to add a new guy at halftime of an NCAA tournament game. But
exactly.
Yeah.
No, and we've asked Penny that about additions to the roster. Now they've got 10 of their 13 scholarship spots filled, but they only have 9 guys available because Buna Kibe, is still working through some academic eligibility stuff, and he's working through an injury as well that Penny didn't go into after the UNLV game. But they've got 9 guys, and Penny, he likes to play.
Well, that almost
11,
is a
12, 13, right? And now he's only got 9 to play.
Right.
It's almost a blessing until somebody gets hurt, right? Until somebody gets in foul trouble,
yes.
until somebody, is suspended or whatever the case may be. These things happen all the time. But no, we've asked Penny, we asked him last week after the Tyreek Smith stuff happened, and he said that he is definitely looking to see who they can add and see if there's somebody available at the end of the fall semester to kind of plug and play. You saw Naquan Tomlin, do that last year. I don't know how much that helped or hurt or whatever, the off the court stuff, the locker room chemistry. I mean, obviously when you're adding somebody of that caliber, other guys are going to get less shots and less minutes and less time to be featured in the offense. So that's going to impact things just by default, even if Naquan Tomlin is, himself a great guy and unselfish and all those good things, but it's just going to have an impact. It's going to have a ripple impact. So you don't know how that's going to impact the off the court stuff, but they certainly could use some help in the front court. All they've got the front court. They've got Dane Danger, Moussa Cisse, Nicholas Jourdain. That's where that list ends of big men, right? And just not a lot of size across the board. I think Cisse at 6'10", 6'11", is your tallest guy on the floor. Danger 6'9", Nicholas Jourdain 6'7". So they could use some size for sure.
Yeah, you're right. I think it to some degree it is playing with fire a little bit to not have as many, scholarship players on the roster. But I think in two ways, it almost works to Penny's favor. One is that he has a tendency to use everybody that's available on the roster when maybe, that wasn't to his advantage.
No.
So, then that's second guessing. I'm not going to pretend I'm as smart as Penny Hardaway when it comes to being a basketball coach. But I do think at times, like in the past, he could have shrunk the rotation a little bit and maybe that would have helped the team. I think that those are fair questions to ask. But I think the other thing is, if he truly wants to be a team that's going to press a ton and play really fast and run and gun, like
you've got to have bodies.
But play smaller players that are going to play to that style. Right. And he's almost forced to do it this way.
Exactly. No, you're right. That's a good point.
Maybe that helps him out as well. So, I don't think it's the end of the world. It would be nice to add another player. But, in a way, it's like you can have addition by subtraction occasionally in sports. And I do wonder if this is just going to make Penny's game planning and roster management easier as a result of this. But again, play on fire a little bit.
100%.
Yes.
100%.
Okay. You know what? One other thing I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah.
Because I've been watching some of your videos and stuff that you post on social media. It seems like we're getting a little bit of a different Penny this year.
No doubt.
So far through these first two games. Like, how do you see him different from years past, Penny?
Yeah, I think the first time we saw this kind of shift, if you will, is very late in the offseason, before that trip to Dallas for AAC Media Day, Irving, when Ed Scott had gotten on board in late July. Tim Duncan was hired shortly thereafter. And they kind of had guys around Penny. Not they didn't trust the previous regime. I don't want to imply that or say that, but maybe guys that he trusted more and saw eye to eye with more, helping him with some of that messaging and helping him understand that, hey, you're Penny Hardaway. You can control the narrative. You don't have to have the narrative control you. And I think once that clicked to Penny, maybe a weight, right, like was removed from his shoulders, and he was more easy to chat with, more introspective, more self-reflective, all those good things that fans have noted in the past 3 to 5 weeks from Penny Hardaway kind of have been seen from that point on. When I spoke to him in Irving for that one-on-one that I did at AAC Media Day, he talked about just the time away from media as much as it was discussed on sports talk radio and in our columns and our writing about how weird or odd or whatever Penny was being. That time helped him kind of look inward, right? Like be alone with himself and his thoughts and his feelings and everything, and figure out like the mistakes that he made. Instead of being defensive, instead of pointing the finger the other way, he realized like, hey, what can I correct? What's in my control? And once that happened, you saw those staff changes come shortly thereafter. And you saw just kind of a better grasp of management, right, from Penny Hardaway. And I think that's definitely spilt into the season with his tone, his chipperness at times with media and all of that, which is refreshing, obviously, as a beat writer, as you can imagine.
Yeah. Well, I think that, look, Penny's always been one that'll give a great answer.
Right.
That's always been the case. It just felt like, and winning obviously helps these things, but, from a distance, because I'm not part of the Tigers media anymore, it felt like it was a little tense towards the end of like last season and into the off season. And like from what I saw at the FedEx St. Jude Classic, media availabilities, it felt tense. But then, watching him now with a couple of wins and a little confidence in the team and from what he's seen, and they lost the 2 exhibition games, but he seemed like he was not ready to even close to hit the panic button on that. I think that's got to give people that are fans of the team, that are reading coverage, that are following, a little bit of a boost of confidence there. So I think that's been good to see from Penny. All right, well, so the Tigers they got Ohio on Friday, correct?
Yep. Yes.
And that's the last tune-up before they do the San Francisco and Maui trip.
Yes.
What do you think that Penny wants to see from this last game against Ohio before they crank up the non-conference schedule a little bit?
I think the most obvious thing is hey, can this team put 40 minutes of basketball, of good basketball together? They have not done that yet. They've won in miraculous fashion, coming back from 14 down against Mizzou, 12 down against UNLV, but can they finally at home with the home crowd behind them, be energized from the opening tip, kind of keep their foot on the gas against an Ohio team they should be better than? Ken Palm's got it as an 88-73 win, right? That's 91% probability for Memphis to win. 15-point victory is what Ken Palm is predicting. So that kind of shows you the difference in caliber of teams we're talking about. Not that Ohio isn't a decent team. They're 143rd in Ken Palm. They could compete for a MAC title. It's not terrible this time of year, right?
Major, yep.
Exactly. I mean, you've covered college basketball. There's high caliber teams playing like the school of the blind and deaf, right? So Ohio is not that. Ohio is a school that will put a competitive product on the court on Friday at FedEx Forum.
I think that you'll always see some mid-major level teams push some of the better teams in the country around this time of year. I think everybody's searching for footing, so it wouldn't surprise me if Memphis gets pushed a little bit against Ohio. I don't think there would be anything wrong with that. In fact, the fact that they have it's almost encouraging that they came back in these first 2 games because
absolutely.
Now they're tested a little bit, and you almost want them to be tested before they play the toughest part of their schedule. And I don't think there would be any. I think Penny might welcome a test from Ohio. Let Ohio make a few threes early and push his team again and help them be a little bit more locked in before they get to that trip out in Hawaii. Are you looking forward to that?
Man,
what do you think?
Am I ever? Are you
what
kidding?
do you think is going to be more fun, Vegas or Hawaii?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think Hawaii, just because it's a little bit longer, right? Vegas was a quick turn type of deal.
Are you a beach guy? Are you going to go sit on the beach?
I love the beach. I love the beach. And I think the place that I'm staying at has a beach view, in the back there. So I think I'll be spending some time in that sand, no doubt.
Well, yes, sir. That will be nice. That will be nice.
It will.
You have fun for me while I'm freezing my butt off in Chicago and Toronto covering the Grizzlies.
Enjoy it.
We don't get any Hawaii trips.
No
man.
Hawaii trips for Grizz.
I did
Grizz
get
beat writers.
You know what? I did get I got a Bahamas trip out of the Tigers. I got that.
That's right. Yeah.
I got a Bahamas.
That was the Wiseman
trip.
year, right?
Yeah,
that was.
You know what? And they upgraded my room. That was the best part, man. They upgraded my room. I was at the very top of the resort.
Why did they upgrade your room? They saw you were Drew Hill from the Daily Memphian and said, "Oh, come on down."
I don't think so.
Is that how that works?
I think maybe the woman checking me in behind the counter had a crush on me or something because I got a free upgrade. So
I'll try to make something like that work. Yeah, that's okay.
But it was a cool experience there for sure. And I'm sure Hawaii will be even better because it's a regular season ball, man. Nothing beats that. So recap for me, who's in the middle of the thick of the Grizzly season. Who are the potential opponents that the Tigers could get out in Maui?
Yeah, so second game in Maui, it's going to be either Michigan State or Colorado, depending on what happens in that first one. Obviously, we can assume that Michigan State is going to beat Colorado, so that way Memphis would have to beat UConn, obviously, to get Michigan State. And if they lose to UConn, they'd get Colorado, most likely. And that last day, obviously, is kind of wide open. You've got the possibility of Iowa State, a rematch against North Carolina, and that list kind of goes on and on, Dayton, and so on and so forth.
How many wins do you think they need to leave Hawaii with to feel pretty good when they get back?
Need? One.
That's what I was thinking, too.
Yeah. It's going to be hard to get 2. It's going to be very hard to go 2
It's going to be really hard to get 2.
Very hard.
But I think if you get 1 win, you feel pretty good coming back.
And if you don't get blasted in the other 2 losses, right? You don't want to lose to UConn by 45. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, but you're going to play up and down early in the season. I think every team is.
Sure.
That's how you catch one of those teams too. Like they could easily catch UConn. UConn doesn't show
the best
up.
time of year to get
Memphis
them.
team, I think, has shown that they can be competitive. So
Yeah.
PJ Haggerty has a great game, and all of a sudden, Danny Hurley's team
Is sweating.
is sweating. So
Yep.
it's a good time of year to be playing this basketball, and hopefully some good opportunities for the Tigers. All right, well, that is going to do it for us this week. Make sure you go check out all of the Daily Memphians' other podcasts. You can go listen to me and Chris. We recorded yesterday and we've got some surprising thoughts on the Grizzlies season, including, by the way, one incredibly wrong stat for me, which has since been pointed out. Hand up on that one. But, yeah. G.G. Jackson, man. I forgot that G.G. Jackson was awesome for the Grizzlies last year.
How'd you forget he was awesome?
You know what? That last year was the season that we never speak of ever again for the Memphis Grizzlies. And
Same
so
for the Tigers. It's something we got in common, I
that's
guess.
how
Yeah.
it was out of sight, out of mind for Chris and I. But you can go listen to that. So we talked about Jake LaRavia, Jay Huff, and all of those guys. So until next time, for Drew, Parth, and Frank, we're out of here.